Hey there, and welcome to the City of Portland's annual hearing conservation training. We're glad you're here because protecting your hearing is not just about safety on the job, it's about keeping the sounds you love in your life, whether that's music, conversations, or just peace and quiet. So let's dive into what OSHA requires, what you need to know, and how to protect your ears for the long haul. Here's what we'll be covering in this training, each piece designed to help you understand, protect, and preserve your hearing on the job. First up is the OSHA Hearing Conservation Standard, under 1910.95K. We'll explain what it is, who it applies to, and what it requires from both employers and employees. Then, we'll dive into understanding noise and hearing loss. That's section 1910.95K3I. You'll learn how noise impacts your hearing and why even gradual damage is something to take seriously. Next, we'll cover hearing protection devices, or HPDs, under 1910.95K32. You'll get a rundown of different types of hearing protection, how they work, and how to use them properly. After that, it's all about audiometric testing. That's 1910.95K33. We'll explain how hearing tests are done, what they measure, and why they're so important for early detection. We'll also talk about engineering and administrative controls. Those are the strategies the city uses to reduce noise exposure at the source or by adjusting work practices. Then we'll review your employee responsibilities, the actions you can take every day to protect your hearing and support a safe workplace. And finally, we'll look at noise monitoring and exposure measurement, how we identify where the risks are and how you're kept informed about your exposure levels. Sound good? Let's get started. Let's start with the basics. What is the Hearing Conservation Standard? The Occupational Safety and Health Administration sets a permissible exposure limit, or PEL, of 90 decibels over an 8-hour work shift. That's the maximum level allowed without mandatory protection. But there's also an action level set at 85 decibels. Once noise reaches that level, certain protective measures are required, like enrolling employees in a hearing conservation program. That means employers must provide audiometric testing, noise monitoring, and hearing protection to employees who are exposed. And here's something important. Employees have the right to a safe workplace and access to their noise exposure data. It's all about awareness, prevention, and protection. The purpose of this training is simple: to help you protect your hearing and understand the requirements that support that goal. The Hearing Conservation Standard, found in 29 CFR 1910.95, is all about preventing noise-induced hearing loss on the job. Because here's the reality: exposure to excessive noise can cause permanent, irreversible damage. But the good news is it's also completely preventable. With the right knowledge, tools, and habits, you can protect your hearing for life. Now, let's look at exactly what is required when it comes to training. And this comes straight from the regulation itself. 1910.95K1 states, "The employer shall train each employee who is exposed to noise at or above an 8-hour time-weighted average of 85 decibels in accordance with the requirements of this section. The employer shall institute a training program and ensure employee participation in the program." In plain terms, if you're exposed to an average of 85 decibels or more during your shift, your employer must not only provide hearing conservation training, but must also make sure you participate in it. That's why you're here today, and why this training matters. It's not just a checkbox. It's about giving you the information and tools to protect your hearing every day. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration doesn't just require hearing conservation training once. It has to be ongoing. Here's what the regulation says under 1910.95K2. The training program shall be repeated annually for each employee included in the hearing conservation program. Information provided in the training program shall be updated to be consistent with changes in protective equipment and work processes. So what does that mean for you? It means you'll go through this training every year, as long as you're part of the hearing conservation program. And each year the training is updated. So if there's new protective equipment or changes in how work is done, you'll get the latest info to stay protected. It's all about making sure you have the most up-to-date knowledge to keep your hearing safe on the job. Now, let's look at what employees must actually learn as part of this training. Under 1910.95K3, the regulation states, the employer shall ensure that each employee is informed of the following. And the first item on that list under 1910.95K3I is the effects of noise on hearing. So what does that mean for you? It means this training must include information about how noise impacts your hearing, what damage it can do, how that damage happens, and why it's so important to prevent it. We'll break all of that down in the next section, so you know exactly what's at stake and how to protect yourself. Next up is 1910.95 K32, which states, the purpose of hearing protectors, the advantages, disadvantages, and attenuation of various types, and instructions on selection, fitting, use, and care, and in simple terms, this means your training must cover everything you need to know about hearing protection devices. What they're for, the pros and cons of different types, how much noise they block, that's called attenuation, and how to select, fit, use, and take care of them properly. Because hearing protection only works when it's the right type, worn correctly, and well maintained. We'll walk through all of that in detail. Now we come to 1910.95 K3 the Trabajo, which says, the purpose of audiometric testing and an explanation of the test procedures. So, your training must explain why audiometric testing matters, and also what to expect when you go in for a test. It's not just about checking a box, it's about tracking your hearing health over time, spotting any early signs of damage, and making sure the protections in place are working. Now that we've covered the requirements, let's dive into the first key topic, understanding noise and hearing loss, as outlined in 1910.95 K3I. We'll take a look at how sound works, what happens inside your ears, and why even everyday noise can lead to serious, permanent hearing damage if we're not careful. Let's start with the basics, how noise is measured. Sound is measured in decibels. The higher the decibel level, the louder the sound. There's also frequency measured in hertz. That tells us whether a sound is high-pitched like a whistle or low-pitched like a drum. Both volume and frequency play a role in how sound affects your hearing. When it comes to noise-related hearing loss, there are two main types you should know about. First, there's temporary threshold shift, or TTS. This is a temporary reduction in your hearing sensitivity, like when your ears feel muffled after a concert or loud job task. It usually goes away with rest, but it's a warning sign. Then there's permanent threshold shift, or PTS. This one's more serious. It means permanent, irreversible hearing damage. Once those inner ear cells are damaged, they don't grow back. That's why it's so important to catch problems early and always protect your hearing. Noise is actually one of the most common workplace hazards out there. And the tricky part? The damage it causes often happens gradually and without pain. You might not even realize your hearing is changing until it's already too late. Prolonged exposure to high noise levels can lead to permanent hearing loss, and once that damage is done, there's no getting it back. That's why awareness and protection are so important. So, how exactly does noise damage your hearing? Let's break it down. Inside your inner ear is the cochlea, and it's lined with tiny hair cells. These hair cells are responsible for sending sound signals to your brain, basically translating vibrations into hearing. But here's the catch. Loud noise can damage or destroy those hair cells, and once they're gone, they don't grow back. That's why repeated or prolonged exposure to sounds above 85 decibels can lead to noise-induced hearing loss, or NIHL. It's permanent, but totally preventable, with the right protection. To put all this in perspective, let's look at some common noise levels you might recognize. A normal conversation is about 60 decibels, totally safe. But busy traffic or a vacuum cleaner? That jumps to around 85 decibels, right at the action level. Now think louder. A chainsaw or jackhammer can hit 100 to 110 decibels, and at the extreme end, gunshots or firecrackers can blast past 140 decibels. Here's the key point. Anything above 85 decibels is considered hazardous if you're exposed to it over time. That's why hearing protection is so important in noisy environments. So, how can you tell if your hearing might be in trouble? Here are some common signs of hearing damage to watch for. Ringing in the ears, also known as tinnitus. Trouble understanding speech, especially when there's background noise, constantly needing to turn up the volume on the TV, radio, or phone, or feeling like people around you are always mumbling, even when they aren't. If you notice any of these signs, don't ignore them. They could be early warnings of permanent hearing loss, and the sooner you speak up, the better. Now that we've covered how noise can harm your hearing, let's talk about how to protect it. The next part of the standard, 1910.95K32I, focuses on hearing protection devices, or HPDs. We'll go over the different types, how they work, their pros and cons, and most importantly, how to use and care for them properly. Because hearing protection only works when it's the right fit and used the right way, why do we use hearing protectors in the first place? Hearing protectors are designed to reduce the amount of sound that reaches your inner ear. They act as a barrier, helping to prevent permanent hearing damage when you're exposed to hazardous noise levels on the job. Now, it's important to remember, they're not a cure for hearing loss. But when noise can't be controlled by other means, like using quieter equipment or rotating job tasks, hearing protectors become essential. They're one of your most important tools for protecting your hearing, and using them correctly makes all the difference. Let's talk about attenuation. That's just a fancy word for how much noise a hearing protector can block out. It's measured using something called the Noise Reduction Rating, or NRR. The rule is simple. The higher the NRR, the more sound it reduces. For example, foam earplugs typically have an NRR between 29 and 33 decibels. Earmuffs generally range from 20 to 30 decibels. You can also use dual protection. That means wearing earplugs and earmuffs together for extra noise reduction. Just keep in mind, the total protection isn't a direct sum of both NRRs. It gives more coverage, but it's not double. Choosing the right protection depends on how loud the environment is and how long you'll be in it. Now, let's go over some quick tips to make sure your hearing protection actually works the way it should. Starting with earplugs, you want to roll them between your fingers, then insert them into your ear canal and hold them in place until they fully expand. If they don't expand properly or aren't far enough, you won't get full protection. For earmuffs, make sure the seal covers your ears completely and the headband is adjusted for a snug fit. Watch out for anything that could break the seal, like hair, glasses, or hard hat straps. And here's a big one. If your hearing protection feels uncomfortable, chances are it won't be worn consistently. So make sure your gear fits well, feels good, and stays secure. Taking care of your hearing protection is just as important as wearing it. Let's talk about how to keep it clean, safe, and working properly. For disposable earplugs, it's simple. Use them once, then toss them. Reusing them can lead to poor protection and hygiene issues. Reusable earplugs should be washed regularly with warm water and mild soap. Keep them clean and dry before reusing. For earmuffs, you'll want to wipe down the cushions, inspect them regularly for wear and tear, and store them in a clean, dry place when not in use. And remember, if any part of your hearing protection is damaged or worn out, replace it right away. It's your first line of defense, and it only works if it's in good condition. Let's talk about how we monitor your hearing over time. The next section, under 1910.95K33, focuses on audiometric testing, a key part of the hearing conservation requirements. This testing helps us track changes in your hearing, catch problems early, and make sure the protection you're using is doing its job. Let's take a closer look at why it matters and what to expect. Audiometric testing is how we monitor your hearing over time, and it's a key part of the city's hearing conservation program. This testing helps us detect early signs of noise-induced hearing loss, or NIHL, before it becomes permanent or severe. The goal is to catch small changes early, so we can take action before lasting damage occurs. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration requires audiometric testing for anyone exposed to 85 decibels or more, averaged over an 8-hour shift. It's not just a test, it's a tool to help protect your long-term hearing health. So why is audiometric testing such a big deal? Because catching small changes in your hearing early gives you the chance to act, whether that's improving your hearing protection, adjusting your tasks, or making other changes to reduce your exposure. And it's not just about staying safe at work. This also helps preserve your quality of life outside of work. Whether it's conversations with friends, music, or the sounds of nature, your hearing matters everywhere. The test gives you a baseline, and with regular checks each year, you can see exactly how your hearing changes over time. There are a couple of key types of hearing tests used in the Hearing Conservation Program, and the first one is the baseline audiogram. This test is done when you first enter the program, and it sets a reference point for all future hearing tests. It's what we use to measure any changes in your hearing over time. The standard requires that your baseline audiogram be completed within 6 months of starting noise exposure, or within 1 year if mobile testing is used, as long as you're wearing hearing protection during that time. Think of it as your hearing starting line. It helps us know exactly where you began. After your baseline test is complete, you'll get an annual audiogram every year you're in the Hearing Conservation Program. This test compares your current hearing to your baseline, and it's used to identify any changes, especially something called a standard threshold shift, or STS. It's a simple but powerful way to track your hearing health and catch issues before they become permanent. These yearly checkups help ensure the protection you're using is actually working. Let's break down what the rules calls a standard threshold shift, or STS. An STS is defined as a 10 decibel or greater shift in hearing at any of the key frequencies, 2000, 3000, or 4000 Hertz in either ear. If a shift like this is detected during your annual audiogram, a follow-up test must be done within 30 days to confirm the results. And if that shift is confirmed, the employer is required to take action. Wondering what to expect during your hearing test? Don't worry, it's quick, simple, and painless. The test is conducted by an audiologist or a certified technician, and it takes place in a soundproof booth to make sure there are no outside distractions. You'll put on a pair of headphones, and your job is to respond whenever you hear a tone, usually by pressing a button or raising your hand. The tones will vary in pitch, which is called frequency, and in loudness or decibels. All of your responses are recorded and used to create an audiogram, a chart that shows your hearing levels across different frequencies. It's a straightforward process, but it gives us valuable insight into your hearing health. And if needed, refer you for further evaluation. This process helps us catch hearing changes early and take action before they become a bigger issue. Now that we've covered how noise affects your hearing and how to protect it, let's shift our focus to how the workplace manages noise overall. This next section covers 3 key areas: engineering and administrative controls, ways to reduce noise at the source or through job practices, noise monitoring and exposure measurement, how we track and assess noise levels on the job, and finally, your role, what you can do every day to help protect your hearing and follow best practices. Let's start with how we reduce noise before it ever reaches your ears. Let's move on to how we reduce noise in the workplace, starting with engineering and administrative controls. Engineering controls are all about reducing noise at the source. That can mean using quieter equipment, adding sound barriers, or installing enclosures to contain loud machinery. The goal is to make the environment quieter without needing extra gear. Administrative controls, on the other hand, focus on how work is done. That includes rotating workers to limit the time anyone spends in a noisy area, setting up quiet zones, or limiting exposure in high-noise locations. It also means enforcing hearing protection practices, so everyone stays safe when noise levels can't be brought down. Together, these strategies help lower the risk of hearing damage before it even gets to your ears. To effectively protect your hearing, we need to know how much noise you're exposed to, and that's where noise monitoring comes in. Employers are required to conduct noise surveys to determine the noise levels present in the workplace. There are 2 main methods used. Area monitoring. This measures the general noise levels in a specific work area. Personal dosimetry. This measures the actual noise exposure an individual experiences throughout their shift, usually using a small device worn on the body. And most importantly, you have the right to be informed. Employees should always be given the results of noise monitoring, along with guidance on how to reduce exposure and stay safe. Hearing conservation is a team effort, and that includes you. Here are your key responsibilities when it comes to protecting your hearing. Wear your hearing protection properly every time you're in a high-noise area. Participate in your annual hearing tests. They're critical for catching issues early. Report any hearing difficulties or noise concerns right away. Don't wait for it to get worse. Follow all workplace noise reduction policies. They're in place to protect everyone. And don't forget to protect your hearing outside of work, too. Loud concerts, music, power tools, it all adds up over time. Taking these simple steps helps keep your hearing sharp, both on and off the job. To wrap up, let's go over some best practices you can follow every day to protect your hearing, both at work and beyond. Recognize hazardous noise. A good rule of thumb is this: if you have to raise your voice to talk to someone 3 feet away, it's too loud. Use your hearing protection consistently in noisy areas, every time, all the time. Check your HPDs regularly and replace them when needed. Worn-out protection won't do the job. Take breaks in quiet areas when possible. It helps your ears recover from high noise exposure. And finally, keep an eye on your own hearing health. If something doesn't sound or feel right, don't wait. Talk to a medical professional. A few small habits can make a big difference in keeping your hearing safe for life. All right, let's bring it all together with a few key takeaways. Noise-induced hearing loss is permanent, but it's preventable. The Occupational Health and Safety Administration requires hearing conservation programs for workplaces with noise levels above 85 decibels. As an employee, you're responsible for using hearing protection and participating in annual hearing tests. And most importantly, everyone has a role in protecting hearing health, both on the job and beyond. We've covered the risks, the requirements, and the tools to help you stay safe.